early on, we learned just so quickly that you will have people that will act like they care so much about this church and they care about you personally. And you quickly realize they don't care about you personally. They care about what they can get from their relationship with you.
What is up? You have tapped, clicked, or stumbled into the Nook Podcast. My name is Steven, and I have the distinct honor of being your navigator in this corner of the ether. As we get started today, I would love to know how you found the Nook. Please take a moment and drop me a note. My email address is steven@nookpodcast.com. That address is always in the show notes, along with links to the Nook Facebook page, my social media feeds, and one that just says support the show, which is a safe and simple way for you to contribute to the Nook financially. Every little bit helps. Continuing in this Personal Jesus series, I have once again struck gold in the odd and wonderful world of TikTok. This time, I had the pleasure of connecting with Annie D'Amico. She is a mother of two, a nursing director, and for the purposes of this episode, a pastor's wife. Having spent many years in full-time ministry, I have seen that pastors' wives can be such unsung heroes in the church. They aren't just posers. They support their husbands and raise their families, usually while working a full-time job. They see all the good, bad, and otherwise within their church, and they typically must do so with a smile on their face, even when things are not all that rosy. Annie shares some of what she deals with as a pastor's wife and has amassed more than 122,000 followers on TikTok.
If anybody's curious, I'm killing it today as a ministry wife. Anybody else married to a pastor and live in a parsonage and it's raining this morning and you're trying to find a reason not to go to church and walk 5 feet? Dude, if you're gonna insult me, be good. Be original, right? Come to the table with a lot more than this.
I appreciate her honesty, especially when the churchy folks get on her case about it. And that's why it was such an easy choice in asking her to be a guest here. So settle in for this conversation with Annie D'Amico. As I pondered what to do with this little series of mine, I really endeavor to be unpredictable. And as I spend various times around the internet and had come across your content actually a few months back as I was putting the series together, it's I would like to know a little bit more behind what is this very special account of yours and just the way that you share stuff. How does a wife, mother of how many? Two. With a full-time gig as a?
Nurse director.
Okay, I knew you're in some kind of a medical health field. And also a pastor's wife. That's just an interesting mix. How does someone like yourself end up on TikTok?
That was not the question I was thinking. That's a good one. Yeah, I love it. How did I end up on TikTok? Honestly, it was just a bit of a whim. And I remember thinking one day, my husband got a little ADD, and he talks every other day about what he's going to do, right? It's a podcast one day, then it's a t-shirt company, then it's all these different things. And I always do videos with him for church and different things. And one day I thought, TikTok's kind of interesting. I feel like I have a different perspective I could offer, why don't I just post something and see? My original goal when I started on TikTok wasn't to necessarily do the pastor's wife persona, not persona, but you know what I mean, make that like TikTok identity. I just wanted to share a different type of Christianity, just have people see what maybe my life looked like and how that played out. Once people found out that I was also a pastor's wife, that kind of took its own role. And it just, honestly, my goal, I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to see if I can just kind of make some people's lives better and if I can do some edifying content. And I thought, I'm going to just do it for a year and see if I can get 10,000 followers. Let's just see. It'd be fun. I don't know. I don't do Instagram. I'm not great with social media. My husband says all the time he can't believe I'm actually a millennial. And so I started it and it just took off. And I ended up, I think I got 122,000 followers right now on TikTok, 4,000 on Instagram. um, all in about a little over a year. So I kind of took that as my, all right, like I need to stick with this a little bit. It's fun. I've pulled away a little bit when it's taken over my identity or I've stressed
Mm,
about it. Hence why I've been back and forth with the emails with you. I get a little nervous sometimes and I just like to retreat.
sure.
Yeah. So I just started it honestly just to see if I could do something edifying and a little bit different out of the norm. So
Is there any way for you to draw some sort of average, aggregate, some other highfalutin sounding word to say who is your typical viewer? Who is checking out that content? Or is it kind of all across the board?
yeah, I would say that I have a little bit across the board. So I should have pulled that information because you can see like men, women. I think I have like 70% women, 30% men. That equals 100. That makes sense.
Good.
30% men. It ebbs and flows depending on what I'm talking about. I always pick up a lot of men followers whenever I talk about my struggles as a wife, which is funny.
Hmm.
But yeah, as far as the people, a lot of the people are either evangelical, ex-evangelical, deconstructed. I feel like I have all over the spectrum because I try to draw in that conversation. So I have a lot of people that are truly like consider themselves ex-evangelical, but it's really good conversation typically.
What, I'll just go right to the word that is so often used. What do the haters say when you get the flack that I'm sure just because anybody with a following of that number typically gets some scourge?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that people just have an idea of who I'm supposed to be.
Mm,
And they just have in their mind what I stand for, what I believe, my politics. Instantly, they decide who I am and they come at me with this preconceived idea of who I am. And when it's not even aligning, it's pretty easy to disregard it. The unfortunate part that I've noticed, especially early on when I started TikTok, is that a lot of the hate comes from Christians. And I hate to say that because I love my Christians. I made a post early on and I privated it because I was like, I'm not trying to get, crazy with my TikTok. Where I had shared that I got told at work one time that I say shit a lot for a pastor's wife. Well, I'm in nursing, man. Like I'm in nursing. It is. They're lucky that's all I say sometimes with nurses. They're rough. Like I shared it on my page just being kind of funny and whatever. Oh my gosh. I have people saying that I was a wolf in sheep's clothing, that I was the reason that people were leaving the church, that I should be ashamed of myself. It was just mind-boggling because I made a joke about it. And I thought, wow, like this is a different world on TikTok, So that's a lot of the hate I get. From the other end of the spectrum, it's just people that come on and want to say, Christians suck, you guys this. It tends to be more broad. Or they like to attack me personally for how I look, or like I have people make fun of my dry lips or something. I'm like,
yeah. I know that with any level of social media, there's just always that odd little section of people that are just out there to stir it up.
Yep.
Maybe I just am old school and think that there's got to be something better to do with your time.
You would think so.
Whatever. But I'm glad that you shared it that way. First of all, that's hilarious and awesome. But it also allows me to say, how does that compare to the types of folks that you deal with in your own church who just again, I've worked in the church world, did plenty of time there, and people are very opinionated, and whether it's a suggestion box or an email to the pastor, do those folks come at you similarly, or is it a completely different ballgame?
It's a little bit of a different ballgame. It's funny. I'm sitting in my husband's office right now because we have a small group at our house tonight. So I'm over at his office and I keep waiting for someone to walk in the office and, it's just always something. So it's different, right? Like I feel like the people at church come at you in more of the, oh, God bless you type of way, where all of a sudden I have to turn my head and go, wait, did they just tell me what to do? Like, what just happened? Was I just bamboozled? There's a lot of that. My husband, from the get-go, when he decided that like he felt called into ministry, which is a whole other ballgame, because I didn't think I was going to be married to a pastor, even though we were always Christians, didn't think this was the route. he had seen this church that we were in, that we have known for a while, go through pastors and beat them up, and then they're out of here, right? And he stepped into this position, and he was so clear from the beginning, hey, like, my wife's not employed here. Like, she is my wife. She loves the church, but she's not employed here. And he set very clear boundaries from the beginning that I always hated. Like, because I kind of felt like, no, let me be here. I'm your wife. Thank God for those boundaries, because he's protected me from a lot. Because I don't always come off like that stereotypical pastor's wife. I remember the first week he was in full-time ministry, I had a lady come up to me, and I had made a comment about having to go to work. And she said, oh, honey, bless your heart, you're working full-time? And I just remember thinking, wow, like, I have a master's degree, got student loans out the yazoo, and you guys pay my husband $25,000 a year. I'm probably going to work.
Wow.
But it was just a very different type of view, because I had some people a little judgmental of that full-time work, of not being home. But throughout the years, that's really changed. So I don't get a lot of that anymore.
How long has this been life for the D'Amicos then?
Yeah. So gosh, let's see. I'm going to be 33 this week.
Happy birthday.
My husband, thank you. So we started when we just got married. So about 10, we've been 11 years in full-time paid ministry, but in terms of the senior pastor, it's been almost 7 years.
At what point into this marriage did he come and present this idea to you? And what was your response?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I love to share it. So it started back, we have known each other since we were 11 years old. Everyone always thinks it's adorable. It is, but like, it's tough knowing someone since you're 11. It comes with its own set of challenges. So we started dating when we were like 16. We always helped in the church together. We had a connection to this church specifically that we're at. And I started going to youth group here. He went at separate times. It was just, we had this connection, right? So we ended up just continuing to serve in the youth. We liked it. We started coming here on Sundays. His parents started coming. My parents started coming. It was just a whole thing. And he was actually in school for criminal justice.
Wow, there's a switch.
Yeah, right. I know. I still think he jokes that he's going to go leave and be a cop. I'm like, you're getting too old for that. So he told me that, that's what he wanted to do. And we just continued to serve in the church. We got engaged. We were married very young, 21, which is wild looking back on it. But I remember we were just engaged, and he came over to the house one day, and we sat outside, and he said, hey, I need to talk to you about something that just happened. I'm like, yeah, like, what's going on? I'm a nurse at this point. I think I just graduated nursing school. We were getting ready to get married. And he's like, I think I'm supposed to go into ministry. And I remember sitting outside the house going, okay, like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't really know. He said, I just feel very strongly. He said that God spoke to me last night. And I can't speak to exactly his story great. But he was convinced of it. He said, I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like it's what I'm supposed to do. And I said, okay. And he's like, if that means moving, if that means this, like, does that change where you're at? And it didn't. I mean, I love this dude. I've known him forever, and I was excited about it. Steve, I'm going to tell you, things lined up, boom, 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 in a way like they never should have. We were at a church that had a long-term youth minister, kids minister, people that were not leaving anywhere. And all of a sudden, somebody was getting ready to leave to go get married, and they had a kids position open. And then they recommended Alex, even though at the time he was only, 20-something years old, and that door opened. And the next thing we knew, the pastor at the time was going to be retiring, and Alex started preaching, and he didn't have a degree in biblical studies or biblical ministry. He only has his degree in education, because he switched at that point from criminal justice to education. It's a long story, because that's him. So the door opened, and next thing I knew, we were in full-time paid ministry, literally right when we started. When he started, that was right after we got married. We just fell into it.
So as far as your married life together, that's kind of all you known, right?
Mm-hmm. Very much. Always full-time ministry.
Well, then that's no short time, especially since there are certain people in ministry that don't make it more than 3 to 5 years, especially when you come in at that children's pastor, youth pastor type.
Yep.
You get to hear about all the goings on within that church. has that sullied your view of people, of the ministry, of even your own relationship with God? Because that's got ebbs and flows and highs and lows, and I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it's cool that it did.
Liked it. It sounded good. So one thing I try to remember my personal, like even my work life, as well as this, is that people are people. Their experiences shape them, right? So when somebody comes at me for something, or when I hear something that is happening in the church, I often remember that they're coming from a different worldview or a different place than I am. So I try not to, as well as my husband, we try not to take things personal. People are people, and they suck. Honestly, they suck. We know that. So there's been some struggles. When he was a new pastor, he had just such excitement. And my husband still has excitement, but it's very different. Early on, we learned just so quickly that you will have people that will act like they care so much about this church and they care about you personally. Mm-hmm. And you quickly realize they don't care about you personally. They care about what they can get from the relationship with you. That hurt early on when I had people that I looked up to that I thought are just men and women that like we would connect with and could grow with. And once I realized, oh, you're actually manipulating this relationship in a way that is not cool. That was really, really hard. And then those people would leave the church, right? Because they realize like they're not getting anything from you. So they're going to go on to the next church. So I don't know that ever made me like resentful of church, but I learned quick.
Yeah.
And it kind of created a little bit of a gap where I started leaving room for safety. Not as quick to jump into new relationships with everybody that walked in the door. I was kind and loving, but I had to give myself some space because I felt like I was getting hurt again and again and again. My husband, on the other hand, he was like, let him go. Who cares? Like he could care less, to some point. But for me, I felt like, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I not connecting with these people enough? Is there something there? So that really hurt. It hurt me for a while. I pulled out of a lot in ministry during that time. But over the past few years, not as much. Yeah. I feel like I've honestly been cleared of a lot of that. I try really hard to make it known that I'm not perfect to this church. I try really hard when new people come in and someone goes, oh, I want to get coffee with you. I make it known very quick who I am. And that I'm not going to be this perfect, smiling pastor's wife every Sunday that's going to be there just to greet you at the door. I'm going to be late, coming in the back door, yelling at my kids to shut up, get to the nursery. Like, and I'm not going to be perfect. And that's taken a lot of time to get there, but it's been so freeing. Yeah. And church feels like enjoyable again because I feel like I'm not always trying to pretend to be somebody I'm not anymore.
Well, you just mentioned your kids. Do you feel extra protective of them when, sadly, people can be so harsh? I don't know. I remember when I first started in ministry, and one of it's one of those things that somebody told me that has notched, and I'll never forget, is that there's a reason that they call us that Jesus referred to as a sheep, because sheep bite. And I think it's probably fair to always say we do it unintentionally, but it still stings. And I imagine that there's times when you feel very protective of your husband. Just the same when you have to feel very protective of your kids when the sheep get a little extra bitey.
Yep. And, we were going through a time where I remember sitting in church when I first had my son. He's our oldest, Judah. He is 8 now. But I remember sitting in church right after he was born. And I was sitting in the back row at our contemporary service, whatever it was at the time. And he started crying. And I can remember this so clearly, just being so stressed as this child was crying. I'm sitting in the back already trying to put on a smile and look together. And I remember seeing this older gentleman start to walk up to me, and his name was Bob. Bob has since passed, but I remember Bob walking up, and I didn't know him super well. And my heart I just was beating, thinking he's going to ask me to leave. He's going to ask me to leave as I'm trying to feed this baby. I'm trying to do the best. But I also want to be here because I just need to be here. And he walked up to me and he goes, Annie, a crying baby in church is the most beautiful sound we will ever have. And he said, never forget that kids in church are the most beautiful sound. And
God bless Bob.
Yeah, Bob is my man, because that has stuck with me. Like, I get chills thinking about it, because that shaped the way I viewed my children in the church. They are a blessing. They are not a problem. People will think they are a problem. They are the problem. So we've attempted to instill that in everybody that has kids in the church. Again, we're very protective of them, but for the most part, we don't run into a lot of people coming at our kids. That will change, I'm sure, once they get a little older.
Oh, yeah.
But right now, it's not too bad. We live in the parsonage right next door to the church, which most churches don't have a parsonage anymore.
Right.
And we hear horror stories of the teenagers that used to live there that were pastors' kids back in the day. So we're very aware of it. Like, everybody was monitoring their every move. But luckily, we've steered pretty clear of that so far.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're just making me flash to a video I saw years back where a pastor was about to baptize his own, I want to say 11-year-old maybe, or somewhere right in that range. And instead of just stepping into the baptism pool, he did a cannonball. And I'm sure that dad was a little bit mortified, but my sick sense of humor, I'm going, I would high five that kid.
That's what I'm saying. Well, we had, so my husband, again, like, we have expectations of the kids. Like, my son wants to wear gym shorts every Sunday. He can't wear gym shorts in the middle of winter. Like, we try to set those standards. So we do have expectations, but they're not crazy. We try to let them be kids. However, our kids minister, she did like a Christmas video of all the kids and had them do interviews. I think my son knew that my husband had not watched the video, and they played it during church, and I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, my kid, like, my daughter, she's adorable and sweet, but like, my son, he was saying like the dumbest things. Like, I mean, when they were like, what's your favorite part of Christmas? Tell us about Jesus. He was saying just like, I feel like it was borderline blasphemy. I'm like, dude, like, my husband was sitting back there just staring at it, trying as everyone's laughing. And I'm like, oh, he's just, no, he's not going to live that one down.
Was he making mental notes for next year that he's going to want to
watch the video beforehand? The year before, it was great. He was sweet. And this time he knew he was trouble. It was tough.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And, just to share this, because it's perfect to share. We were talking about the expectations for like your children and for you. I had the strangest thing happen about a year ago. I had somebody in the church come up to me. So my sister-in-law and brother and their kids come to the church as well. They're a little younger than us. And they've only been coming for maybe 3 years. I had a girl come up to me and say, I need to talk to you about something that's really been bugging me. I have a really big issue. And I'm like, yeah, like, let's chat. This girl's a little older than me. She said, I have a big problem with your family.
Wow.
I said, my family? Like, what do you mean? And she said, your sister-in-law. I said, my sister-in-law? I'm like, my sister-in-law is the nicest person I've ever met in my life. So I don't know what the problem is. She said, yeah, every Sunday when I walk in and I walk by your family, she said, your sister-in-law and your brother never say hi to us. And I'm like, I just remember sitting here listening to this person. And I'm like, haven't you gone to this church for like 30 years? And my brother and sister-in-law have gone here for 3? And you walk in front of them and they don't see you. You don't make eye contact and they don't say hi to you. She was so upset about it. She went to like the deacons to complain about it. And my husband shut it down so quick. He said, our family does not hold the expectations that I hold. My wife does not hold the expectations that I hold. And like, he shut it down quick, because we even had like deaconess. We have a deaconess. I don't know who she was. She came to me. She said, hey, I have some concerns about the friendliness of your sister-in-law. I'm like, I shut it down quick. And she's like, okay, obviously you're passionate about this. I mean, it hurt me. I thought, really? It was wild. It was just wild. It really, and I even told this girl, I said, I just don't feel like that's fair to put on my family that they don't smile and hi to you.
Yeah. And
she'll never listen to this.
I guess I figured you probably had to have a story or 12 about that kind of presumptuousness or pettiness that people just hold. And that's why I would even go back to say that it doesn't surprise me one bit that the people come at you so hard from the Christian side when you,
Yeah.
regardless of what you say or do on TikTok. As much as we like to call ourselves good and redeemed and all those Christianese type words, it's also, I think we're foolish when we don't recognize the Pharisee element that we retain or that we step into, that suddenly when we deputize ourselves into thinking, all right, time to shape this place up because I've got the idea, I've got the plan for how we should all be acting, behaving.
Yep. And people don't meet your standard. And I'm like, what in the world? We set this unrealistic standard even among each other.
Yes.
It is mind-blowing to me. How would I feel comfortable coming in here? Do I have to smile and wave at everyone? She doesn't smile and wave at me when I come in.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even that, I mean, where is the grace? Where is that?
Yes.
Where is that assuming the best about everybody that walks in the door?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love what you said about you're just Annie. Everything that you've said here so far is that you're just Annie. You don't feel like you have to put on that pastor's wife hat whenever you enter the building, or that if you, just in case you bump into somebody at the grocery store. I would imagine that probably puts some of those Pharisee types off, that you aren't more conforming. But I also can't help but figure or hope that your realness allows somebody else to breathe a little easier, somebody who might be your exact same age, a year or two younger, a year or two older, that says, that's so good because I don't have it all together either. And here's my pastor's wife, and she just seems cool.
Yeah. We've had luckily a fair amount of that, which has been so nice. My best friend now, she, when she started at this church, she said, just seeing my husband as such a young pastor, and we're in an old church. Our church is 200 years old.
Oh,
it is
wow.
Yes, it's the oldest one. It's debated, first or second oldest church in Indiana. It's a whole thing. So she started here when she moved from Kansas, and she said when she started at this church and she saw this old Baptist church, but she came in and saw this young pastor, his wife who was so normal. She's like, I just couldn't help but go, I need to get this. Like, what's going on here? And that's how so many of our friendships have started, because I don't ever want people to come into faith trying to pretend to be someone they aren't because of me, or just because of life, because of the things that we set up for people, these unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
That's honestly my primary goal, is just to show people life is messy, faith is messy. Being a pastor's wife doesn't make you any more special than anybody else. You know, you have some people that I joke, they like go to college to get their MRS degree and marry a pastor. I'm like, I would have ran away. I don't. So, you know, I want people to know there's a different way to do all this.
Yeah.
On a funny note, I don't dress up a whole lot to church. I struggle with it. I probably should look nicer. You know, I get it. But a lot of the times I'm just trying to get out of the house.
Sure.
And I'm just like, just let me get clothes on and take a shower. Last week I had extra time. I don't even know how or why. And I dressed up a little bit. I just put on like more work clothes. The amount of people at church were like, oh my gosh, you look at you. I mean, we didn't know you could dress. And I thought, no, I know these older people, they don't want to act like it, but they love seeing me dressed up. It was so funny how many complimented it.
You sadly reset your own bar, and now that's the expectation, Annie. See? You have to meet last week's Annie now every single time.
Nope. My husband, he's like, I knew it. He said, I knew when I saw you walk over, I knew every single person that was going to say something because they're going to want that every week. I'm like, yes. They're not getting it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you mentioned how I'm sure that had to give you a certain manner of peace to have somebody say, oh, my gosh, you just seem so normal. What a compliment. Since this is normal in your home, is there anything that ever makes you go, oh my gosh, I never saw that coming? Or is there just always kind of a certain degree of being kind of, you're front facing, you're dealing with people in all manner of life and through their highs and lows. Is it possible for you to even say, well, here's what a normal week looks like, or is that ever changing?
It's ever changing to some extent. It's tough on our marriage at times because it is, there's always something, and there's always something that can throw everything for a loop. That I think is the hardest part that I don't know that I was really prepped for, because my husband is really good at making sure we set time away from church. But there are times where like things just happen. We live next door to the church. People show up at all times of the day for help, or they need something, or we have an older congregation. Being a 200-year-old church, there's an emergency, there's a hospital. So some of that is so hard and throws a wrench into things. And then again, I work full time, 40 hours a week plus. So no, there's no norm, but that's okay. Like we just go with the flow.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You make me think of a video I saw of yours not so long ago. And I was just glad that you were so honest about it, that you were just basically saying, well, yeah, this is what it looks like. We were going to have a date night, and Mr. Pastor guy got called to I think it was a hospital call or something that night. And it's like, okay, we're going to have to call a timeout and reschedule this for another day. Is that normal?
And some of the people, it's not crazy normal, luckily, because we have a music minister who is more like an outreach minister, honestly. He's the guy who's, actually just heard him walking by laughing because I think there's choir going on. So if you hear a crazy laugh.
Actually, I just heard what sounded like a choir, and I'm like, oh, how could this be any more perfect? I swear I did not mix that in post.
That's so funny. I'm like, so I'll sneak it in. Luckily, we have a really good music minister who is so good with that stuff. And he'll often say, hey, Alex, like I will go visit so-and-so. And they tag team really well. But there are times when Mark can't do it and Alex knows that he needs to step in, or there's a family that he needs to see. It's the weird stuff, though. It's not even the hospital visits. It's like just a few weeks ago, Alex said, I can't share it for another couple months. I got to let time pass for some of the stories. But he's like, let enough go that if someone hears it, they don't know what you're talking about. We like had somebody show up and they had 4 flat tires, right? Which was super weird. So Alex pumps them up, and then one tire needs a rim. Next thing I know, he's going to get this guy a new rim or something. And I'm just sitting here going like, okay, like, are we moving on here? Like, come on. Then next thing I know, the guy needs groceries. So then Alex is going to the food pantry. Then, no joke, it's been like 5 hours that Alex is helping this guy. Because Alex is like, there's something not right with him, but like, I need to help him. Alex leaves. We let him sit in the church. Alex comes back. He's passed out in the bathroom. Alex is like, we call 911. It was just this. I don't even know what happened. But we just spent 6 hours helping a guy get new tires just to send him out with 911 because he passed out in the bathroom. And I think he had little alcohol bottles around him, so he might have drank. I don't know.
Wow.
It's the stuff I can't account for that.
Sure. Well, there's no category for that. I don't care what you think you need to do to prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Well, there's not tons of things that take us off. It's a lot of those little odd things. Just little odd things, but we've worked it out. Alex is also very good with taking the kids with him places. Like if I have to work late and he has a visit, those kids are going to the hospital. They're going to the clearinghouse. They're going to get someone gas. They're kind of seeing all that as well.
So does that I'm sorry, but that's got to do your heart well. That your kids are seeing that real stuff, and it's not just dad on a platform with lights and a nice looking podium and all those things that can seem very dressed and proper, but taking care of people, you're going to get your hands dirty
all the time. And that it just even saying that, like it can make me cry because I want my kids to know Jesus. I want them to know what real faith looks like. I stress all the time about having pastors' kids. I don't want pastors' kids.
Yeah. You're
know
right.
what I'm saying.
Yep.
I don't want that. I want my kids to know Jesus and for them to be like, oh yeah, dad did ministry, but this is our life. Jesus is our life. How we love people is our life. And Sundays, we do it a little bit differently. And daddy has a little bit of a different job. But it's because we're telling people about Jesus. So I
Yeah.
love it. They're not your typical pastor's kids, which I do think that's changing too. I think you have a lot more of me, like people like me in ministry now, wives like me who are going, wait, we can't fill this mold anymore of what we're
Yeah.
supposed to be. So I think that's changing. But
Well, and for whatever this podcaster's nickel is worth, I'm so glad that
yeah,
stuff like that. I don't know. I've grown very weary of the mold. And
yeah,
I think I've said it on this podcast multiple times that we of faith do the watching world such a disservice when we portray our faith as perfect and fits that box every single time. Because faith is messy, because life is messy. And I don't know. I don't ever want to be the reason that somebody outside the church says, I don't want anything
no
to do with
thanks.
that. I don't.
Absolutely. And I think that all the time. And that also, I'm aware of that even with my TikTok as well, because I know no matter what, there's going to be people that say, I am not portraying ministry right. I'm not portraying Jesus right, that I'm doing a disservice to whatever this faith is. I know that. So I do try to be very aware of that. I will have people that say that, but I never want to find validity in what they're saying.
Mm,
So I'm so aware of that. Like, I know I cuss sometimes. I'm aware that that can be a stumbling block for people. I had alcohol in one video. You would have thought I had alcohol in one video where I zoomed in, and they were like, "That's a lot of liquor you have there for a pastor's wife. Da, 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 that's a lot of liquor for a parsonage." And I'm like, "We live next to the biggest distillery in Indiana, and our friend is like the head honcho there. Like, we get free alcohol." It's it's mind blowing the things people do. So I don't want to be a stumbling block, but I'm not going to hide pieces of who I am. And that's something I love about my husband too, so much, so deeply. We do not hide who we are. We don't hide our failures. We don't always scream them to the world. But I can share anything about our life, about our marriage, about our struggles, because I know I have a husband who will do it too.
yeah.
He never wants to pretend to be someone he's not or a husband he's not, and same here. So I love that, the freedom that I have to be who I am, because I have a husband who sees that too. And I think that is so beautiful, and I'm so thankful for it.
Well, even just that statement right there says to me that you're quite aware of what the flip side of that would very well look like. That stress, that strain of, oh yeah, we can't say that. Oh, we don't want to ever portray. Because
Yeah,
then you're truly not who you really are.
exactly. And every once in a while, he might say something like, "Hey, I know that you want to talk about this. Can we talk about it? Because I just want to make sure we're on the same page." Or every once in a while, he'll critique a video I post. He has never said, "You need to take that down." He might say, "Hey, I know what you're trying to say." Like, I was tough on Joel Osteen. I think he's insane, and I can't stand him. But it is what it is. I said something about Joel Osteen months and months ago, and I had so many people saying, "What's wrong with Joel Osteen?" And I'm like, "Y'all ever heard of the prosperity gospel? Is that a thing?" And Alex said to me on a flip side, he said, "Hey, I agree with everything you said." He's like, "But make sure you remember there are some people who learn to love Jesus even through the Joel Osteens."
Mm,
And I thought, okay, and he's like, "So if they hear you just tearing him down," he's like, that's going to do something to them. So make sure that you remember there are people who come to faith through things that we don't always fully believe in. And so I've tried to be cognizant of that in everything that I say and do.
right. But how is that really a whole
Yeah.
lot different than any of us? I mean, I was just on a friend's podcast and we were talking about stories, and I try to be as open as I can about my road rage issues, and how I do everything I can to not tell people how they're number one.
Yep.
And because whether they know me or not, that's my wife is the one who will just be it's like, hey, come on. And it's
Yep.
not the shaming kind of thing. It's just that's not who you are. Hey, that's not who I am. But it's I don't know. You're right in that we
Yeah.
still have to be able to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. But at the same time, we're
Exactly.
all walking this thing daily.
Every day.
With everything that we have talked about And again, thank you so much. I knew this was going to be a very spirited and wonderful conversation, and it's been all of
I
that
love
and
it.
then some. When it's just Annie and just Jesus, after however it was you were raised, whatever your expectations were going into marriage and family and all those things, based on all the things that have built you to be who you are today, who is Jesus to you in the right now?
Oh gosh, I wish you would have worded that one beforehand. That's a tough one. It's not tough, but it's tough to put into words.
Yeah.
Because I often have people tell me that they view Jesus as like out of reach for them, right? Like they're like, I just have a hard time connecting with Jesus. When I have a hard time connecting with Jesus, which I've struggled with a little bit recently, but it's not because I feel far away from him. It's because I know he's right next to me, and I want to turn away from him. I want to say, get away, please, just leave me. Give me a little bit of space right now. Like I can't do this. And lately, I just am reminded he's right here. And I feel like I sometimes, like when I'm struggling personally, we have life. You just have personal things you're working through. And right now, Jesus to me is that friend who you want to say, leave me alone. I don't want you, who's going, no, I'm right here. And like, you can't get about me as much as you want to. And it has been so comforting because I have never felt like he's out of reach. I have sometimes just felt like I don't want to listen to what he has to say.
Sure.
I know that's probably not the uplifting thing you wanted, but I've been dealing with just feeling disconnected recently and trying to disconnect from him recently, but he's not letting me.
And honestly, that's why I
that.
would not want to show my hand in that. I want real, honest to goodness answers in a question like that in a series like this one. Because like what I was just sharing a second ago, it's just like, following Jesus is hard. It just is, because we're learning, we're growing, hopefully we're making progress in our relationships. But that doesn't mean that you just wake up every single morning with the same perfect zippity-doo-dah smile on your face and everything is just amazing all day, because it's not. But I'd rather go through all the garbage with him than without. And I don't mind telling people that.
Exactly. And that's the thing where I feel like right now I'm sitting here with this friend who's going like, hey, we need to talk. And I'm like, I know we need to talk. Like, you're right. I'm just not there this second. Like, just give me a little bit to breathe, okay? Because like, I know you're there. I know your thoughts. Like, I get it. Just let me breathe for a minute. And that there's something so comforting in that. I have never just felt like God is absent, like Jesus is absent. But I felt like I wanted to be absent from him. I've never been able to. That probably is why I'm reformed over here. But
Oh, I get it.
I try.
That you wish at times he wasn't right here, but at the same time, you have to be glad that he is.
Exactly.
It's hard to choose just one area about this discussion that I enjoyed the most. More than anything, I just admire Annie's honesty, especially as one who is constantly being evaluated by others. She is unapologetically herself, and I wish that more of us were like that. Am I being honest with others? And more importantly, am I being honest with Jesus? I'd love to know how you feel about this. My email address is in the show notes. Coming up next week in the Nook, Amy Patrick has dealt with unimaginable suffering.
I have learned about hearing God in the midst of pain because I got thrown into the fire. And I knew that I desperately needed to hear from him if I was going to survive. And I absolutely mean that literally.
Her story is one you won't soon forget.
At my front door, the police told me that my husband, my partner, the father of my children, the man I had known since I was a teenager, the man who shared, more memories of my life with me than anyone else, was dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound that they believed was intentional. Nothing prepares you for that. Felt like I was having an out-of-body experience standing at my front door.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook.
The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.